What do you give your wife on the birthday she shares with the man she is secretly seeing at work? How do you stay calm when everyone thinks you are the jealous, controlling husband, right up until she opens a folder full of her own messages and hotel receipts in front of her family? Why would a quiet man like me choose to let a judge finish the party instead of throwing a scene in our kitchen? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. My name is Marlo Ives, and for a long time I believed that if you worked hard, stayed calm, and trusted the person you married, the worst thing that could happen between you would be a simple misunderstanding that could be fixed with patience and a few honest talks. I used to think people who lost their marriages must have ignored obvious signs or chosen the wrong person from the beginning, and I was quietly proud that Elena and I had built something that looked solid from the outside. We had a small apartment with fading paint in the hallway, a daughter who left colored pencils everywhere, and a routine that felt safe, even when money was tight. I went to my job in an open-plan office, came home, helped Lily with her homework, and tried to be grateful for simple days. It took me a while to notice that our life had started to bend around someone I had never invited in, a man who lived in Elena's work messages and late-night laughter, and by the time I realized it fully, I had already been cast as the jealous husband in a story I did not write. It started in small ways, the kind you can excuse if you want to keep your peace. Elena began coming home later, saying that the logistics team needed her to stay and coordinate shipments, that mistakes at night were expensive, and her presence saved the company money. She talked more and more about her coworker Ryan, always in a bright, admiring tone, saying that he understood her work ethic in a way I never could because he stayed late with her. At first I listened and nodded, telling myself that she was proud of being valued by her team and that it was normal to talk about colleagues you spent so many hours with. But then I noticed that when I asked small questions, like how often she and Ryan stayed alone to finish things, her expression shifted. She would tell me that I was starting to sound suspicious, that she was tired and did not want an interrogation after a long day, and she would leave the kitchen before I could say anything else. Her phone started living face down on the table, buzzing with messages that she read quickly and answered with short smiles before locking the screen again. When I walked past, I would sometimes see Ryan's name at the top of the notifications, or Tara's name, the coworker who always posted loud group photos from office events. Elena began referring to the team as her work family, saying that they understood pressures I could never understand because they were all in the building together when things went wrong. I told her, in calm, indirect speech, that I was glad she had support at work, but that I missed the days when she looked happiest coming home, not staying away. She answered that I was being unfair, that she was simply growing in her career, and that I needed to stop acting like every late shift was some betrayal. I let the first few weeks slide because I did not want to become the person she was describing to her friends. I convinced myself that this was a phase, that a big project was causing extra stress, and that once things settled, she would go back to regular hours and long talks on the sofa. Still, I could not ignore the way my stomach tightened when her phone lit up late at night, and she smiled in that half-secret way before turning it away from me. I did not grab the phone or demand to see it, because I believed that once you crossed that line, it became easy to justify worse lines later. Instead, I watched patterns the way I watch numbers and trends at work, with quiet attention and a growing sense that something in the data was wrong. One evening, after Lily had gone to bed and the apartment was quiet except for the hum of the fridge, I sat at the small desk in our bedroom and opened my laptop. I created a new spreadsheet, nothing dramatic, just a file with the date as its name, and I began to enter simple information. I wrote the days when Elena came home late, the times she texted that she was staying a little longer with Ryan, and the mentions of last-minute drinks with the team. I did not add accusations, only observations, because I wanted to be sure that I was not imagining a pattern where none existed. The columns looked harmless, just numbers and short notes, but as they stretched downward, they told a story that was harder and harder to ignore. I tried to speak with my mother about it without sounding like I was accusing Elena of anything specific. I told Marta that Elena had a new coworker she admired and that she was spending more nights at the office. My mother listened quietly, then said that work friendships could be good, but that when they started to replace time at home, something usually needed to be examined. She advised me to protect my heart and to pay attention without attacking Elena, because accusations thrown too early could be turned against me. Later, I heard from Elena that she had spoken with her own mother, Sylvia, about my questions, and the version that reached me did not match what I remembered saying. Elena told me that Sylvia believed I was becoming controlling and that I needed to stop trying to limit her career, and I realized that I had been promoted from concerned husband to villain in another house before I even knew the full story. One night, while I was still at the desk adding another line to my spreadsheet, a small calendar reminder popped up in the corner of my screen. It said, Riverside, 11:30 a.m., meeting personal. An appointment I had set after a long, restless evening when I decided I needed to talk to someone who did not take sides, someone who could tell me whether my concerns were reasonable. I had not mentioned it to anyone, not to Elena, not to my parents, not to any friends. It sat there on the screen like a secret thought, blinking quietly. I stared at it for a moment, my cursor hovering over the dismiss button, wondering if talking to someone outside this mess would make things better or just confirm what I already feared. Before I could decide, I heard the soft scrape of a key turning in the apartment door, the familiar metal sound that had always made me feel calm. I clicked dismiss, sending the reminder back into the calendar, then closed the spreadsheet and minimized the window so that the desktop showed only a harmless background image. A second later, the bedroom door opened and Elena appeared, smiling as if nothing were wrong, carrying the smell of perfume and office air with her. She told me, in indirect speech, that the team dinner had run long and that Ryan had insisted on paying for everyone to celebrate a successful week. I nodded and said I hoped she had enjoyed herself. As I watched her move around the room, taking off her shoes and placing her phone face down on the nightstand, I realized that the key sound that used to comfort me now acted like a hook in my chest, pulling questions I was still too calm to shout. The next few days at work showed me how quickly a private story could become public when the wrong person decided to share it. I sat at my desk in the open-plan office, surrounded by the usual glow of computer screens and the constant low murmur of phone calls, and I began to notice the way colleagues glanced at me, then looked away. 2 coworkers near the break area whispered while scrolling through a phone, and one of them glanced in my direction before they both laughed quietly. I pretended to focus on my reports, but their reactions felt like small taps on a glass wall around me, warning that something had already escaped beyond the apartment. Later that morning, a colleague I had known for years walked over and mentioned, with an uncomfortable smile, that he had seen a post online where a woman complained that her husband hated her male coworker and tried to limit her career. He said the situation sounded similar to mine and asked, half joking, whether I had finally turned into one of those jealous husbands who could not handle his wife's success. I kept my voice steady, explaining that I had not tried to limit anything, that I simply wanted reasonable boundaries, and that I did not appreciate private problems being turned into entertainment. He nodded, but his eyes told me that the version of me he had already seen elsewhere was stronger in his mind than anything I could say now. Near midday, my manager Damon sent me a short message asking if I could step into the meeting room for a quick word. I walked across the office floor, feeling a few more glances follow me, and entered the small glass-walled room where he waited with a tablet and a neutral expression. He said that he had heard some concerns about my behavior at home and that it might be bleeding into workplace conversations. He emphasized that he did not want to pry, but he mentioned hearing that I was upset with Elena's work commitments and that I had made things difficult around her schedule. He suggested that I keep my personal issues separate from my job and that I should maybe find a way to trust her more. I told him, in careful indirect speech, that I had not raised my voice or threatened Elena, that I had not interfered with her work, and that any tension came from repeated boundary pushes and late nights that she dismissed as harmless. I added that I had been doing my best to stay calm and professional, both at home and at the office, even as I watched my role in her story change from husband to obstacle. Damon listened, then said that he understood, but that perception mattered as much as reality here, and that he wanted to make sure no one felt there was a problem that might impact my performance. He ended the conversation by advising me to handle things quietly and not let them spill into my work environment. I walked out of the room knowing that Elena's version had reached another part of my life and that my attempts to control the damage would be judged as more evidence of the same flaw she had given me. During lunch, I opened my spreadsheet again, this time adding a new tab. I wrote down initials for people who had mentioned the situation and dates when I heard them repeat parts of Elena's story. I did not add insults or opinions, only notes like C8, heard about jealous husband post, or Damon, meeting about behavior concerns. It felt mechanical, almost cold, but the act of recording gave me something solid to hold on to in a place where my reputation was turning into a rumor shared over coffee. The screen looked like any other data set I handled daily, yet I knew that each line represented another step away from the marriage I thought I had. After work, I stopped at the supermarket to pick up a few things for dinner, because keeping routines intact felt safer than going home too early to sit in silence. As I stood in the checkout line, I heard 2 women behind me talking about a social post they had just read. One described a story where a woman complained that her husband was trying to control her friendships at work, and could not accept that she had a close relationship with a male coworker. The other laughed and called the husband insecure, saying that men like that always ended up alone. One of them mentioned a handle I recognized as Tara's, the coworker who filmed everything and posted without thinking about consequences. I did not turn around or correct them. To them, I was just another stranger in a line with a basket in his hand. Instead, I paid for the groceries and stepped aside, then quickly checked my phone while standing near the exit. A group chat I rarely used had lit up earlier with a screenshot from Tara's account. The image showed Elena laughing at a table with people from her office, and the caption complained about a husband who could not handle work family and wanted to keep his wife locked at home. The comments beneath it were full of strangers calling the man controlling, some even suggesting he did not deserve such a bright woman. I saved the screenshot to a separate folder, another quiet entry in a growing archive of my own life as told by someone else. When I slipped my phone back into my pocket, my fingers brushed against a small folded sticky note I had placed in my wallet that morning. On it, in my neat handwriting, were the words, "Bring forms," a reminder from a part of me that had finally accepted this might not be fixed by a single honest conversation. A few minutes later, as I walked toward the car, my phone buzzed again with a short message from Damon, asking if we could have a quick follow-up the next day to make sure everything was settled. The screen lit up in my hand, showing his name and the phrase, "quick follow-up," and I realized that what Elena had started as a story about my jealousy was now officially part of my record at work as well as my home. A few days after that message from Damon, Elena told me that her team was having casual drinks at a rooftop bar downtown and that I should come with her so I could finally see for myself that nothing was wrong. She said it in a bright, rehearsed tone, explaining that if I saw how everyone interacted, maybe I would relax and stop inventing problems. I could hear a challenge inside the invitation, a test to see whether I would accept the role of sulking husband who stayed home or the role of quiet man who showed up and pretended to be fine. I agreed to go, not because I felt reassured, but because I needed to watch the way she behaved around Ryan when she believed the crowd was on her side. If she was right, and I was imagining things, the evening would show me that. If I was right, then I needed my own eyes to confirm what the spreadsheet and screenshots already suggested. The rooftop bar was one of those places with soft industrial lighting, small trees and concrete pots, and a view of the city that made people feel more important than they were. When we stepped off the elevator, the air smelled like perfume, alcohol, and grilled food, and music pulsed just loud enough to make private conversations feel secret. Elena walked ahead, waving at people she recognized, and I followed at a slower pace, taking in the room. I spotted her quickly near the center, already sitting too close to Ryan at a round table, her shoulder brushing his as they laughed at something Tara was showing them on her phone. When she saw me, she gestured for me to come over and announced that I had finally joined the fun, as if my presence alone was an event. I sat down opposite them, with a drink someone pressed into my hand before I could refuse. Tara made a point of saying that it was nice to see me out of my serious husband mode, and a man I barely knew joked that I had come to inspect Elena's second office. Ryan grinned and put a hand on Elena's chair, saying he had been telling her I had nothing to worry about because they were just partners in the trenches. Everyone laughed, and several eyes turned to me, waiting to see if I would rise to the bait or swallow it. I chose neither. I simply said, in calm, indirect speech, that I was glad her colleagues supported her, and that I hoped boundaries were as strong as the jokes suggested. The conversation moved on, but the tone stayed the same. They talked about late nights in the office, about delivery crises and last-minute calls, while Elena leaned in whenever Ryan spoke, her body angled toward him in a way that used to be reserved for me. At one point, Tara raised her glass and proposed what she called a playful toast. She said they should drink to the company's real power couple, pointing at Elena and Ryan, and then to the lucky home husband who got to enjoy the leftovers. A few people laughed too loudly, maybe to cover their own discomfort, while others shouted that it was just a joke and that I should learn to have a sense of humor. Elena did not correct them. She simply squeezed Ryan's arm and rolled her eyes in my direction, as if I were the only person in the room who might misunderstand. I felt something inside me go very still. Instead of answering her with anger, I reached into my pocket, unlocked my phone, and opened the voice recorder app. I set the device on the table near my drink, screen dark, with the microphone facing the center of the group. A faint beep sounded, quickly swallowed by the music and conversations around us. I did not need every word. I wanted the overall picture, the tone, the way they spoke about me when they thought laughter could erase cruelty. I listened as Elena referred to Ryan as her work husband, explaining to a new hire that it meant they understood each other better than most married couples understood their partners. Someone added that real-life husbands should be grateful when their wives had strong support at work, even if they pouted sometimes. When I finally spoke again, I said quietly that hearing those words hurt, because it felt like I was being moved to second place in my own marriage. I did not accuse, I did not raise my voice, I simply described how it felt. Elena laughed and told the table that I had an old-fashioned idea of marriage and that I would catch up eventually. Tara raised her phone and pretended to take a picture of my expression, saying that his face was the perfect meme for a man who could not handle modern relationships. A few people chuckled nervously, others looked away, but no one suggested that maybe the joke had gone far enough. I sat there, hands folded on the table, thinking that if this was how they behaved with me present, I had been naive about what happened when I was not there. Later that night, the crowd thinned, and people began leaving in pairs and small groups. Elena said she needed to stay a little longer to help Ryan finish planning for the next week, and she suggested I go home ahead of them so Lily would not wake up alone if she had a bad dream. I told her, in indirect speech, that I would rather wait in the car and that there was no rush. She looked annoyed but did not argue, just said that I was being dramatic and that they would not be long. I nodded and walked to the elevator, carrying with me the memory of the way she had laughed at the idea of me being a problem. The company parking garage was cooler and quieter than the rooftop, the concrete floor reflecting the scattered light from overhead fixtures. I sat in the driver's seat of my car, turned off the engine, and let the silence settle around me. Then I played back the short recording from the bar, listening to the raised voices and the clinking glasses, the cheers to the real power couple, and the dismissive tone when my discomfort was mentioned. I noted the time on my phone and the duration of the clip, then saved it into a folder with the same date as my spreadsheet. While I was doing this, my phone screen lit up with an incoming call from a number saved as private, the same label I had given to a contact who had agreed to meet me at the Riverside appointment if I chose to keep it. The sound was muted, only a small vibration against my palm, and I watched it until the call faded and the screen went dark again. As I slipped the phone into the cup holder, I heard footsteps echo along the concrete, slow and measured. They approached my car, paused briefly near the driver's door, then moved on into the deeper shadows of the garage. I did not look to see who it was. A few minutes later, I saw Ryan's car pull out from a corner space, its headlights sweeping across the pillars. Elena walked beside it, then opened the passenger door and got in. The car paused at the exit ramp for a moment, their shapes visible through the windshield, then disappeared into the night. I sat still and watched the empty space they left behind, understanding that the line between work family and something else had already been crossed long before anyone admitted it. The following week, Elena's birthday approached, and both our families decided we should have an early dinner together at a family restaurant to celebrate. The idea came from Sylvia, who said it would be good to show everyone that we were united and that any talk of tension was just people reading too much into harmless work stories. I agreed to the dinner, not because I believed her, but because I needed to see how openly Elena planned to maintain her role in front of people who claimed to love us. The restaurant was crowded that evening, full of clinking plates and loud conversations, and we filled a long table near the back with parents, siblings, and a few cousins. From the start, the mood felt forced. Elena sat between Sylvia and Tara, glowing under their attention, while Lily sat closer to me, coloring on a paper placemat with the few crayons the server had given her. Sylvia asked Elena about work, and Elena eagerly described long nights with the team, carefully highlighting how much responsibility she shared with Ryan. When Sylvia glanced at me and asked whether I had finally relaxed, Elena answered for me, saying that I still struggled with trust but that she hoped I would grow. Several people laughed politely. I felt my father's eyes on me from the other end of the table, steady but silent, a quiet reminder that I did not need to match their volume to hold my ground. At one point, Tara decided the table needed entertainment and brought up the rooftop drinks. She told the story of how I had sat in the corner looking serious while everyone else enjoyed themselves, how Elena and Ryan had kept the mood alive, and how she had nearly turned my expression into a joke for her social feed. The way she said it made me sound ridiculous, like a guest at my own humiliation. Elena laughed and said that she had tried to include me, but that I could not handle modern friendships. Sylvia shook her head and commented that some men just could not accept strong women who had male friends at work. The implication that my discomfort came from weakness rather than repeated disrespect settled like smoke over the table. I waited until the laughter softened and then spoke in a calm, clear tone. I said that it hurt me to watch my wife treat another man as her partner in front of a crowd, especially when jokes about husbands were the main course. I added that I believed in boundaries and that I did not want to feel like a guest in my own marriage. I did not accuse, did not raise my voice, did not list evidence or describe what I had recorded. I only described the feeling of standing there while my role was publicly downgraded. Sylvia responded immediately, saying that Elena was simply building her career and that I was exaggerating because of old-fashioned ideas about marriage. She told the table that women who worked in mixed environments needed understanding, not restrictions, and several relatives nodded along, more interested in peace than truth. My mother, Marta, spoke quietly from near the middle of the table. She said that in her experience, people who respected their partners did not make them the butt of jokes in front of coworkers. She added that trust was important, but that trust did not mean ignoring patterns that hurt. Her words were calm and almost gentle, but they cut through the noise more effectively than any shout could have. Sylvia bristled, accusing her of clinging to old ways and insisting that Elena had every right to enjoy her friendships without being policed. My father, Jonas, did not speak during the argument, but his gaze met mine, and I saw something like apology and support in it, as if he wished he could stand between me and whatever came next. Throughout the meal, I watched who glanced at Elena with doubt and who looked at me with suspicion. Under the table, I unlocked my phone and opened a message thread I had titled Follow Up. I typed a few brief notes about what had been said, the phrases Sylvia used, the way Tara framed the rooftop story, and then deleted the draft message, leaving the thread empty but ready. I did not need to send those words to anyone yet. Simply writing them helped fix them in my mind. I knew that if this ever moved beyond private conversations, every small detail of how I had been framed would matter. A few days after that dinner, I took Lily to the park because she had asked for some time with just the two of us. The playground had a bright slide, swings, and a small climbing frame, and she ran between them with the energy only children seem to manage. I sat on a bench nearby, watching her play, thinking about how easily adults broke promises they claimed were sacred while children treated every small agreement like a contract written in stone. Eventually, she grew tired and came to sit beside me, her legs too short to reach the ground, her shoes swinging above the gravel. She looked up and asked if I was still angry with Mommy. I told her, in careful indirect speech, that I was not angry in the way she imagined, but that I was sad and confused because sometimes grown-ups forgot how to be kind to each other. She frowned and said that Mommy talked a lot about her job friend, Ryan, and that she smiled more when she said his name than when she talked about me. Then she asked, very simply, whether Mommy loved her job friend more than she loved me, because that was how it sounded when she listened from the back seat of the car. The question landed in my chest with a weight heavier than any accusation I had heard from adults, because it came from a place with no agenda, only honesty. I told her that love was supposed to mean putting your family first, and that sometimes people forgot that and got caught up in attention that did not last. I added that whatever happened between her mother and me, we both loved her and would not stop being her parents. She nodded slowly, not fully satisfied, but willing to accept what her 7-year-old mind could hold. Then she jumped off the bench, ran toward the swings, and called for me to watch how high she could go. As she ran, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I took it out and saw a calendar reminder on the screen, the same one I had pushed away before. It read, Harborfront 3 p.m., meeting personal. The appointment I had scheduled with someone who knew how to turn facts into something more concrete than gossip. The reminder blinked gently, asking to be dismissed or accepted. I stared at it while Lily climbed onto the swing and swung her legs, laughing at the sky. I pressed dismiss, but this time the act did not mean refusal. It meant that the meeting had moved from idea to decision in my mind. I knew I would go, not to punish Elena, but to make sure that if the story of my life was going to be rewritten, at least part of it would be set down in a place where laughter could not erase it. In the days after that afternoon in the park, I stopped arguing with Elena about her late nights and her messages and started paying more attention to what could be proved and what could not. I kept my voice soft, my movements steady, and I let her believe that my silence meant surrender. Inside, something had shifted. I no longer hoped for a simple talk to fix things. I simply wanted clarity and a way out that did not destroy Lily in the process. When Elena mentioned plans for her birthday, a larger party than usual in a rented community hall, I heard the opportunity inside her excitement. She wanted a celebration surrounded by family and friends, a room where everyone would tell her how bright and hardworking she was, and where I would be expected to smile and act grateful. I realized that if I ever wanted the truth to stand by itself, I needed witnesses who were not filtered through her stories, and that her birthday, of all days, would be the moment when she least expected to see herself clearly. One evening, after she had taken Lily to gymnastics class, I stood in the hallway outside our small bedroom and pulled the old home printer onto the narrow table by the wall. The light from the ceiling was harsh and a little yellow, but it was enough. I opened my laptop and went to the clean desktop tree I had built over the past weeks, the one with folders labeled Home, Auto, Bank, and the two archives, A and B. Inside one of the archive folders, I had collected screenshots of messages between Elena and Ryan, photos from hotel lobbies that matched dates when she told me she was staying late at the office, and copies of posts where Tara talked about secret after-work drinks. My cursor trembled once, then steadied as I selected a group of files and sent them to print. The printer hummed to life, the smell of warm toner filling the hallway as white pages slid out one by one. Lines of text appeared, timestamps, and small icons, messages that could have been innocent in isolation but formed a pattern when placed together. I watched them appear without flinching. I had already read them many times in silence. Already felt the pain of seeing my wife describe me to Ryan as a problem she had to manage, while he encouraged her to stand up to her boring husband. Now those digital wounds were turning into paper, something you could hold in your hand without needing a password. When the last page emerged, I stacked the sheets carefully, making sure the order told the story clearly but without unnecessary cruelty. I then took a single USB stick from my desk drawer, a plain device with no special markings. I plugged it in, copied the full digital archive onto it, and when the progress bar finished, I ejected the drive and held it in my hand for a moment. It felt lighter than the weight it carried. I wrote the date on a small piece of paper, folded it, and placed it under the keyboard for my own reference. Then I walked to the living room cabinet where we kept our financial folders. I pulled out the thick binder labeled Taxes, lifted the back cover, and used a strip of tape to secure the USB underneath, out of sight unless someone knew to look. After sliding the binder back into place, I closed the cabinet and returned to the hallway. On the table beside the printer, I laid out a thin binder we usually used for household notes. I removed old receipts, slipped the printed messages and photos into transparent sleeves, and arranged them in a smooth sequence. On the spine label, instead of writing something dramatic, I simply wrote household, the same word it had carried before. To anyone glancing quickly, it would look like a folder of bills and schedules. To Elena, once she opened it, it would be a mirror she could not edit. And just as I snapped the ring shut, I heard the key in the front door. I slid the binder into my bag, pushed the printer back against the wall, and wiped a bit of toner dust off my fingers. Elena came in with Lily chatting beside her, carrying the smell of outside air and chalk. She told me in indirect speech that the gymnastics class had gone well and that the other parents had commented on how dedicated she was, working full-time and still managing to attend. I smiled, told Lily I was proud of her, and helped her hang up her jacket. When Elena mentioned the birthday party, her eyes sparkled with anticipation. She said she was excited to see everyone, that she deserved one night where she was the center of attention without any tension. I agreed calmly and said I would make sure she got a present she would never forget. She laughed, thinking I meant something sentimental or practical, and told me not to stress about it. On the evening of the party, we arrived at the community center hall early to help set up. Tara and Sylvia were already there, hanging string lights and arranging tables, moving around the room with the easy energy of people who believed the night belonged to them. Elena walked through the hall, commenting on decorations and telling Tara where to place the cake stand so the photos would look good. I stayed near one of the side tables, helping Peter carry drinks from the car and arranging plates and napkins in neat stacks. Lily ran around excitedly, examining the balloons and asking if she could be the one to hand Elena her presents. As guests began to arrive, the room filled with warm noise. People brought wrapped gifts and bakery boxes, hugging Elena and telling her how young she looked, how impressive her job was, how lucky she was to have such a supportive husband. I accepted the compliments with a polite nod and a quiet smile, knowing that most of them were based on a version of me they had heard through her filter. Sylvia flitted from group to group, making sure everyone had a drink and casually mentioning that Elena had been under so much pressure lately because of unnecessary drama at home. Every time she said it, she glanced at me with a mixture of pity and irritation, as if she hoped my face would prove her point. When it was time for gifts, everyone gathered near the table where the cake waited, candles still unlit. Tara took out her phone, ready to record the whole scene. Elena sat in a chair near the center, her back straight, her smile wide. One by one, people handed her their presents, and she opened them with the same rehearsed delight. A scarf, some perfume, a necklace, a framed photo of her with Lily. She thanked each person with a quick hug or a joke, and the room responded with warm laughter. I waited until the other gifts were done before stepping forward with a thin binder wrapped in simple paper. I held it out and said, in a quiet voice, that this was something I had put together myself, something that belonged only to our household. Elena smiled and joked that I was probably giving her a budget plan disguised as a present. The people around us laughed softly, expecting nothing more than another joke about my practical nature. She tore the paper off, revealing the familiar binder labeled household, and for a moment she looked confused. Then she opened it. The first page showed a series of messages between her and Ryan, timestamps lined up beneath small icons of their faces, talking about hotel bookings and how she would tell me she was working late. Elena's smile faltered. She flipped to the next page and saw a screenshot of a hotel confirmation email with her name and Ryan's initials, the date matching one of the nights she had sworn she was stuck at the office with a broken system. Another page showed a chat where she told him she would put her phone face down at home so I would not see his name. Tara's phone, still recording, captured her face as the color drained away. Sylvia stepped forward, asking what this was, her voice tight. Elena snapped the binder shut halfway and told her it was nothing, just old messages, then opened it again as if hoping the pages would change. She turned to me with a look that mixed fear and anger and asked, in indirect speech, how I could invade her privacy like this. I answered calmly that I had not hacked anything, that everything in that binder came from screens she left in full view, or from confirmations sent to our shared email. I added that I had put it together because I needed her, and everyone who defended her, to see what I had been seeing while being called jealous and controlling. The room had gone quiet, the earlier music now just a faint background. Tara lowered her phone without realizing it, her hand shaking slightly. Some relatives stared at the pages. Others looked away, unsure where to fix their eyes. Sylvia declared that this was cruel, that a birthday was not the time to air dirty laundry, and accused me of humiliating Elena in front of her loved ones. I replied that the humiliation had started long before tonight, at rooftop bars and in whispered stories about the jealous husband who could not handle his wife's work family. I said I had simply handed the story back to its author in a form that could not be edited. Peter picked up the binder and flipped through a few pages, his face turning gray. He did not defend Elena or attack me, he simply stared at the proof, then lowered his head. My parents stood near the edge of the circle, Marta's hand on Jonas's arm. They did not cheer, did not rush forward, but I could feel their support like a steady wall behind me. Lily, standing near the cake, looked from one adult to another, unsure why the present had changed the air so quickly. She asked in a small voice if we were still a family. Her question cut through the buzzing tension more sharply than any accusation. I turned to her and said quietly that we were her family and always would be, but that grown-ups sometimes needed to decide if they still made a good team. I did not mention divorce or separation. Those words belonged to another place. Then I faced Elena again and told her, in indirect speech, that I was done raising my voice, done begging for respect, and done being the villain in her stories. I said I would handle everything from this point on properly, without shouting, without late-night arguments, and without public posts. My voice stayed low, but the decision inside it was final. As I finished speaking, my phone vibrated softly in my pocket. I felt the buzz against my leg and knew, without looking, that the alarm labeled Paper Drop 9:45 a.m. was flashing on the screen, right on time. The next morning, the city felt strangely clear, as if the air had been washed overnight. I left the apartment early before Elena and Lily woke up. I walked past the community center where the decorations had already been taken down and headed toward the courthouse plaza, a place I had visited once before to fill out simple forms in another life, when our problems were still small. This time, I arrived with a different purpose, one shaped by every line in my spreadsheet, every printed page in that binder, and every question Lily had asked on that park bench. In my pocket, my phone buzzed with a short message from an unsaved number confirming that the paperwork and temporary orders were ready and that service would occur in the lobby once all parties were present. I replied with one word, understood, and put the phone away. The courthouse lobby was high and echoing, filled with the sounds of footsteps, low conversations, and the occasional squeak of a wheel on a suitcase. Light filtered through tall windows and reflected off polished floors, making everything seem sharper than in ordinary buildings. I waited near a side wall where I could see both the entrance and the main hallway, my hands resting loosely at my sides. I was not there to argue anymore. The time for arguments had passed when the binder opened on Elena's birthday. Now I was there to step aside and let the written truth do what spoken words could not. Elena arrived with Sylvia walking slightly ahead, her heels clicking loudly on the floor. She wore a work dress, hair pulled back in a tight style she usually reserved for important meetings. When she saw me, she rolled her eyes slightly and said, in indirect speech, that it was dramatic to come to such a serious place just because I had embarrassed her at her party. She suggested that maybe we could ask someone in the building about counseling options or about how to handle a husband who overreacted. Sylvia nodded in agreement, her chin high, already preparing to present her daughter as the wronged one. Before I could answer, a man in a neat jacket approached us with a folder in his hands. He looked at Elena first, then at a paper on his clipboard, and spoke her full name in a clear voice that carried just enough to be heard by the people nearby. When she confirmed who she was, still half smiling, he handed her an envelope and stated that she was being served with a petition for dissolution of marriage and temporary orders regarding finances and custody. The words dissolved the rest of her smile. She opened the envelope with quick, jerky movements, pulled out the first page, and scanned it. Her eyes moved back and forth across the lines, and then she looked at me as if I had suddenly become a stranger. She asked, in a cracked voice, How I could do this over one mistake. How I could throw away years of marriage just because she had needed support at work. Sylvia stepped forward, demanded that the man take the papers back, insisting that there must be some misunderstanding. The server answered politely that service was complete and that any response would have to follow the instructions in the documents. He then turned to me and asked me to confirm my name for his record. I did so calmly, my voice steady in the echoing space. I told Elena, in indirect speech, that this was not about one mistake or one night. It was about months of lies that turned my pain into entertainment and my concerns into a joke told at bars and family tables. I said I refused to teach Lily that marriage meant accepting whatever hurt you as long as the story looked good to other people. I did not list the evidence. She had held it in her hands the night before. I did not raise my voice or call her names. I had already seen where that kind of energy led, and I wanted no part of it. I simply stated that I was choosing a different path now, one drawn in ink instead of tears. Sylvia tried again to speak, but her words tumbled over each other, anger and fear mixing into an accusation that I was breaking the family. Peter arrived a few minutes later, breathing hard from hurrying, and took the envelope from Elena's shaking hand. As he read, his shoulders sagged, and he did not look at me with hatred or at her with complete sympathy. He looked instead like a man who finally understood that staying quiet had not kept anyone safe. My parents stood near the lobby entrance, their faces serious but calm. They did not approach or cheer, they simply watched, ready to walk out with me when I was done. The process server noted something on his clipboard, then nodded once more and stepped away, already moving toward another task in another corner of the building. The lobby noise flowed around us again, people passing by with their own papers and their own problems, barely glancing at the scene. Elena said my name once, then again, her voice rising as she asked how I expected her to explain this to everyone, how she would tell Lily. I did not answer. I had promised myself I would not have another public argument with her, not even here. I turned toward the glass doors and began to walk. The floor under my shoes felt solid, the light ahead almost too bright after the softer tones inside. As I pushed the door open, the sound of the lobby faded behind me and the steady hum of the city took its place. In my mind, I saw Lily on the swing, asking if we were still a family, and I knew that whatever shape our family took next, it would not be built on lies she learned to ignore. I stepped into the plaza, the folder still in Elena's hand far behind me, and let the door close on the echo of her voice and on the story I had finally refused to live inside.